Hello, everybody. It's Broadcast Team Alpha Wednesday show. It's Casual Wednesday. And usually I say there's nothing really serious going on, but I don't know. There might be a little something serious going on tonight. We have one of our favorite guests, and Augie's going to tell you about him. But let's just think for a minute. Whether you hate the president or whether you love the president, if he broke a tooth and was missing for 48 hours, wouldn't you wonder what was going on? Anyway, before we get into this, I would like to invite you to connect with us. Connect with us on our YouTube site. We are looking for 5,000 beautiful subscribers. So just please subscribe. And I know you're so sick of hearing click the bell, so I won't say it. And you can connect with us on broadcastteamalpha.com. And we have all kinds of newness coming up. We have the Mastermind Connection coming up, where you can join in a global think tank for the purpose of creating change. And there'll be more coming on that. We also are so grateful to you for your super chats. You inspire us to keep going, and you give us the means to keep bringing this show. So without any further ado, Augie, please introduce our guest.
Yes. Yeah, we have Jim Nichols coming back to Broadcast Team Alpha. And it's going to be another fascinating subject we will be discussing. And he's an artist and a UFO illustrator. And he was actually very famous across the internet. And he did not even know it, because he did not have a computer before just, a few years back. And his paintings were everywhere on the internet. People were using them on their website and their picture galleries and everywhere. And nobody told him. That's kind of interesting. Now, he's also a lecturer and a videographer. And he is heading up a group in Tucson where we go every month for an interesting lecture and interesting discussions. We have a lot of fun with that. And tonight we will be hearing about that President Eisenhower appears to have met with extraterrestrials. Yeah, that's going to get interesting. And after tonight, maybe you won't even like Ike. I think it's going to be up to you to decide. But for right now, Jim, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Jim. Yay.
Augie and Nori, thank you for having me back once again.
Thank you.
Another fun session, I hope.
Absolutely. Even more fun.
Okay.
I mean, after my due diligence and my research, I made a comment the last time we talked that I have a whole different perspective on you, as a UFO artist. And after doing my homework, I am ever so astounded, and I love the way that you present everything, and I'm just really grateful to be here for this conversation tonight. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That's a delightful compliment.
Tis true.
Yeah, and there's so much to talk about. I don't know, where do you want to start with this, Jim?
Where do you want to start? Well, let's start. This information we're going to kick around tonight, you can find on my website. It's a blog that's called Briefing Paper.
Mm-hmm.
And
what's your website?
Jim Nichols, UFO.net.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is one of my first blogs. In fact, this is my first lecture that I gave at Laughlin, Nevada, at the UFO conference back in 2010. So this was, I had been involved in UFO research and so forth for a very long time with my illustrations, and then I did a TV show, talk show here in Tucson for 7 years. And through my research, I kept coming across these little snippets in this book and that book and this book and that book that talked about President Eisenhower having an ET contact in California in 1954. And I thought that sounded so bizarre and so outrageous that I just dismissed it. But then after a while, it got to be so pervasive that, wait a minute, you're saying that the President of the United States had face-to-face contact with extraterrestrials in 1954? That should be a bigger story than the Roswell crash. Why hasn't anybody told this in a narrative that's easy to understand and that just covers all the main points? So I thought, well, since nobody else has done it, I'll do it. So that's when I decided to put together a script or for a documentary, which I did later, called Briefing Paper. So my lecture presentation eventually became a video on UFO TV, where you can access it now. But the way the story goes, and you can, if you accept it, the general gist of it is that in February of 1954, President Eisenhower flew to Palm Springs, California, and stayed at a guest ranch there to play golf. And not long after he arrived there, he just kind of disappeared, which was totally out of character for Ike, because anytime he got anywhere near a golf course, he was out on the links. But this time, Ike was missing, and after a while, the press got wind of this, and the press went absolutely ballistic. They thought, "Oh my God, he's had a heart attack. He's died." There was this whole panic about where has the president disappeared to, right? So, Press Secretary James Haggerty called an emergency press conference and assured everybody, no, President Eisenhower is fine. He was eating some chicken. He broke a tooth and had to be rushed for emergency dental care, emergency dental treatment because of his broken tooth, right? But President Eisenhower vanished for like 48 hours. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, the unofficial story was that Mike didn't break a tooth at all, that Ike had been rushed to nearby Edwards Air Force Base, which in those days was called Muroc, mm-hmm. for a prearranged secret meeting with extraterrestrials. Okay? So I'm thinking, wait a minute, this doesn't sound like just a random thing. This sounds like this had already been in the planning for a long time. And if we understand the history of ufology after 1947, and President Truman also allegedly knew about extraterrestrials, and he created a group called MJ-12 to study this phenomenon. So I'm thinking that MJ-12 may in fact have had an extraterrestrial in their custody, or had some kind of liaison with extraterrestrials to prepare a treaty prior to President Eisenhower's meeting at Edwards Air Force Base, because they wanted President Eisenhower to sign a treaty with a particular extraterrestrial group. So how's that for starters?
Wow.
You guys are awful quiet.
Yeah. I want to hear what's next.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, allegedly, Ike was shown 5 extraterrestrial craft, and allegedly he met with 2 separate extraterrestrial groups. The first group was claimed to be Pleiadian, that they were Nordic, they were human-looking, and they suggested or asked Ike if he would if the United States would refrain from any further development of atomic weapons. And Ike's advisor, Bernard Baruch, who was head of the Atomic Energy Commission, advised Ike that that would not be a good idea.
Mm.
So the Pleiadians, graciously withdrew, and another group arrived who were the Little Grays. They claimed they were from the Zeta Reticulum star system, and that their species was in decline, and they wanted to make a deal to have access to human DNA to revitalize their species, and that to do so that they would offer us unlimited technology in exchange.
Mm.
So consequently, that was the group that Ike allegedly made the treaty with. Okay?
Mm.
Okay. So.
Sounds to me.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, sounds to me like that program they were doing to revitalize their species is not going very well because they're still doing it 70 years later.
Well, that became obvious down the road.
Yeah.
At the outset, Ike thought, well, they had demonstrated their superior technology, that even if we opposed them militarily, there was nothing we could do about it. If they wanted to take over, we had no defense against them. So it was really like a take it or leave it deal. And I suspect as being a military man himself, Eisenhower clearly saw that our military disadvantage and decided, well, maybe we can make a deal in the short term to where in the long term we can get on par and defend ourselves against these people or these entities. I'm thinking that was his mindset. But at the time, I'm sorry, Ike, but this is a deal you can't refuse. And he had advisors there with him. He had military advisors. He had spiritual advisors, people from the church. And he had at least one advisor that was present who had a background in metaphysics. But Ike wanted to get a cross-section of different people from different backgrounds to get a sense of how the general public might react to this awesome event. If in fact he needed to go public with this. Could the public even handle it? And allegedly based on the really bad reactions, psychological reactions from the advisors that were there, they absolutely decided they could not disclose this to the public. But anyway, the gentleman whose background was metaphysics, according to a gentleman called Meade Lane, who was the director of Borderland Sciences in Los Angeles, said that his friend, whose name was Gerald Light, was actually at Muroc with President Eisenhower's entourage. And this is the quote. This is Gerald Light's quote after having seen this experience. He says, "The report is true, devastatingly true. I had the distinct feeling the world had come to an end with fantastic realism, for I have never seen so many human beings in a state of complete collapse and confusion as they realized their own world had indeed ended. The reality of other plane aeroforms is now and forever removed from the realm of speculation and made a rather painful part of the consciousness of every responsible scientific and political group. Mm-hmm. During the 2 days visit, I saw 5 separate and distinct types of aircraft being studied and handled by our Air Force officials with the assistance of the Etherians. I have no words to express my reactions. It has finally happened. It is now a matter of history.
Wow.
So,
Well, I knew I liked the Pleiadians.
this is a whopper doozy. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
These
uh,
Ethereans, do we have any indication of what they looked like or actually who they were?
which group? The Ethereans?
The
The
Ethereans.
Ethereans, I would assume, I'm not sure to tell you the truth. It could have
Yeah.
been the Greys or it could have been the Pleiadians. It was reported that at least one of the groups that appeared to Eisenhower actually vanished or made themselves invisible right in Eisenhower's presence,
Mm.
causing Eisenhower considerable embarrassment.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm sure he was trying to figure out where the door was at too.
How to get that tooth fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that
Yeah.
was. There was another gentleman who was also allegedly present, and who was affiliated with the Brookings Institution back in the East Coast, and that was a think tank that was developing policies for NASA in case we did encounter extraterrestrial life over the course of our manned space activities. And they determined that it might not be a good idea for public disclosure from the Brookings Institution point of view of an extraterrestrial reality.
Mm-hmm.
And the gentleman's name was Edwin Nourse, and he was part of the panel, the think tank panel that made decisions on the possibility of how the public would react to an extraterrestrial presence. Well, if he had been actually at Muroc, he would have known how bad the reaction was, the psychological reaction of confronting extraterrestrials was devastating. So it was the Brookings Institution that 6 years later published a report stating that anthropological files contain examples of societies sure of their place in the universe which have disintegrated when they had to associate with previously unfamiliar societies espousing different ideas and different life ways. Others that survived such an experience usually did so by paying the price of changes in values, attitudes, and behavior. Now, I would suggest that this was not just idle speculation. They were basing this on the actual emotional challenge that this contact in Muroc actually had. So I think this is another indication that something significant may have happened at Muroc, California in 1954.
I'm sure it did, and what he said that different society may even disappear after they get, contacted or in touch with other higher intelligent civilizations. Then look what happened to the Americas and several others that has gone that route, and it's not a good track record.
Well, even my good friend Bob Dean, who was a retired command sergeant major, who allegedly in the early 1960s was serving NATO headquarters in Europe when they published a study on the reality of extraterrestrials, which he always referred to as the assessment. And Bob said that there were high-ranking military officials within NATO that had near emotional breakdown, having to face the reality of an extraterrestrial presence. So it's not all that far-fetched that this would not have a good impact. The impact would be almost devastating on people who really didn't have a background to deal with this. Okay.
I think it probably would affect the military more so than it would affect private individuals. I think we are more flexible in their mind or in our mind than the military is, because they are all ego and conquer, and if you have a problem, you obliterate it. That is their attitudes.
Well,
So,
especially coming on the heels of World War II, when we were confident that we were the most powerful force on the world, if not the universe,
yeah.
and in a twinkling, in just a twinkling, to realize that our most sophisticated weaponry is absolutely useless.
Mm-hmm.
That's a shocker that most military mindset could not handle very well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand that.
So, anyway, Ike made a deal with the Greys, and the deal was that we would give them access to a military base in Nevada, and also a military base, an underground military base in New Mexico, for them to do their whatever it was they planned to do. And it was actually the base in Nevada where the technological exchange would take place. That the DNA work that they wanted to do would be underground in New Mexico, and the technology exchange would happen in Nevada. But after a while, after a time, it became evident that the Greys were not living up to their end of the bargain. They were supposed to supply a list of abductees, their names and their identities and where they lived and so forth. They had agreed to give the government a complete list of any and all people that they abducted. Well, after a while, it turned out that they were not complying with that. That people were being abducted, that their identities were not being given to the government. There were also cattle mutilations. There were also stories of human mutilations that were going on. So it became evident after a time that the Greys had no intention of honoring their end on the treaty. So let me just share with you. This is a quote from Bill Cooper's book, Behold a Pale Horse, where he's describing the Ike's deal. He said, the treaty stated that the aliens would not interfere with our affairs and that we would not interfere with theirs. We would keep their presence on Earth a secret. They would furnish us with advanced technology and would help us in our technological development. They would not make any treaty with any other Earth nation. They could abduct humans on a limited periodic basis for the purpose of medical examination and monitoring of our development, with a stipulation that the humans would not be harmed, would be returned to their point of abduction, would have no memory of the event, and that the alien nation would furnish Majestic 12 with a list of all human contacts, and abductees on a regular scheduled basis. It was agreed that bases would be constructed underground and that the use of the alien nation, and that 2 bases would be constructed for the joint use of the alien nations and the United States government. Exchange of technology would take place in the jointly occupied bases. These alien bases would be constructed under Indian reservations in the Four Corners area of Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. And one would be constructed in an area known as Dreamland, a remote section of Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we know where that's at.
So
well, I don't. What a strange name. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Dreamland. It's like this is where
Mm-hmm.
technologies beyond general comprehension are being worked on.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
So
connected
consequently,
to
it's given a strange name like Dreamland.
connected to Area 51.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm just really disappointed in the Greys' integrity. Stinkers.
Well, let's take this a step further. Are the Greys really the Greys? Are the Greys really sentient beings in the first place? Or are they automatons?
Oh.
Are they genetically engineered automatons?
Yeah.
Well, that throws a wrench in the story.
That puts a new wheel on the wagon, don't it?
Exactly.
Well, as I recommend Philip Corso's book. Colonel Philip Corso was National Security Advisor to President Eisenhower during this time frame, and he wrote the book the day after Roswell, which was published in 1997, 50 years after the Roswell crash. And Colonel Corso doesn't mince words about the Greys. He said these creatures weren't benevolent alien beings who had come to enlighten human beings. They were genetically altered human automatons, cloned biological entities, actually who were harvesting biological specimens on Earth for their own experimentation. As long as we were incapable of defending ourselves, we had to allow them to intrude as they wished. We had negotiated a kind of surrender with them as long as we couldn't fight them. Now, I had the opportunity to interview Colonel Corso at Roswell in 1997. And we asked him, he says, if in his estimation, he says, if these entities, he says, if they looked like clones or they were clones. And he was unequivocal. He said, no, he says, they don't look like clones, they are clones. He says they're genetically altered biological entities, and he called them extraterrestrial biological entities. They didn't call them ETs, they call them EBs.
Yeah.
But to his estimation, he says they were not nice, and that it was a complete mistake for us to make a treaty with them.
Great.
From the stories that come out of Dulce, on the 5th floor or 6th or 7th floor down, they are growing these Greys in solution. So they just kind of grow like underwater or solution plants. And also I've seen an autopsy report on a Grey, and that said that it was closer in physiology to a plant than a human.
Well, that's what Shady D in the chat room said. The Greys have chlorophyll for blood, don't they? Meaning that they're part plant, part human. Or alien, yeah. Is that true?
Well,
do we know?
Maybe a little bit of both.
A little bit of both, yeah. Wow.
There's there's some other problems with that. Also, Department of Defense geologist and engineer, the late Phil Schneider, stated, back in 1954, under the Eisenhower administration, the federal government decided to circumvent the Constitution of the United States and form a treaty with alien entities. It was called the Grenada Treaty, which basically made the agreement that the aliens could take a few cows and test their implant techniques on a few human beings, but they had to give details about the people involved. Slowly, the aliens altered the bargain until they decided they wouldn't abide by it at all. So, with this in mind, if you're President Eisenhower and you realize you just sold out your whole country, maybe the planet, to a hostile alien group, how do I disclose this to the American public? How do we hide this from the American public? how do we finance these secret technology operations that are going on at Area 51? Okay, so we can't divulge this to the Congress. The Congress, holds the purse strings. We can't tell them what's going on. We can't tell the public what's going on. And it's like we're caught between a rock and a hard place where we have to finance this. So how can we finance this secretly?
That's like a big whoops. Whoopsie.
Oops.
Now what? Oh
Now
my
what?
goodness.
Well, you can always finance it with drug money.
Oh, of
You can
course.
always finance it with off the books, maybe less than legal means of accessing large sums of money. So let your imagination run wild on that one. What can we do under the radar that can generate the huge amounts of money that it's going to take to finance these secret technology operations? So you can see this is kind of where, as over the course of Ike's presidency, where he suddenly realizes he's losing control. Because you have the CIA becomes the banker for this. Okay? And this is what President Kennedy realized as he came into office. Think about this background, this secret deal background, and then think about what President Eisenhower said when he left office and he warned about the growing danger of the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
You see how this all factors in? So wait a minute. Maybe Ike was trying to warn the public about something he really couldn't be explicit about. Okay?
It was a well-placed comment, because the thinking people, they would ask, what did he say? But a lot of people never caught it, though.
Right.
Yeah. But we're talking about drug money, and that's where Zapata Oil Company and the old man Bush got involved, and then he could transport drugs to the oil platform, and from the oil platform into Houston, there were no customs, so they got it all in, didn't they?
Well, that would certainly be a convenient way to do it, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And if that would become very successful, you can imagine how that would boost George Herbert Walker Bush's status within the CIA, within the intelligence community.
Oh, yeah.
Is that why he took the pill? Is that what happened?
Well, okay, George Bush Sr. in later years admitted, he says, if the American public ever knew what we had done to them, they would hang us from the lamppost.
I'm not going to sleep tonight. Okay.
Yeah.
You can
Oh
see
my
now.
goodness.
Okay, you're the president of the United States, and you know all this. Now, are you going to go public? I mean, it's like they have formed the treaty. Is talk about quid pro quo.
Yeah.
Here's a treaty without advice and consent from the Congress, without advice and consent from the American people, that totally subverts the United States Constitution.
Yeah.
And I'm president of the United States. I have to explain this to the public.
No president would want to.
You're right. You'll take down the whole government. This will crash the whole government. So it's like they say, disclosure is impossible and inevitable. At some point, this is going to have to come out.
Yep.
And it's going to be a shaky day when that happens.
Yeah.
But the good thing about it for those guys is that most of the people that actually did this, they're dead now, so they cannot be punished. So the legacy of them, that is what have to answer for what their predecessors did.
Exactly. But it's not now. At this point, it's not just they're all accomplices after the fact.
Yeah.
Okay. So, anyway.
Yeah, and then there are several treaties that we're talking about, not just one, it seems like.
Well, are you aware of if you're aware of another treaty, let's hear about it.
Well, the Germans, they evidently, with Hitler, they evidently had a treaty with someone. And there's papers floating around the Europe 50 years ago that I saw that indicated, German papers, that indicated, yes, there was a treaty. He had an agreement with someone, not from here, in where he got technology from them. And we don't know what the Russians have done. We really don't. We kind of suspect, but we don't really know.
Well, there's some. Well, the other thing was that they discovered. I believe they discovered that the Greys had made treaties with other countries.
Yeah.
When they had told us that they wouldn't do it. Everything that they agreed to do, it's like they reneged on.
Yeah.
So.
And then, of course, MJ12 got in the middle, or got created so they could run this show. And what I'm concerned, they've run it very well. They have kept a lid on it. And where do you think it's going from there?
Well, it's become like a machine all unto itself. It's become like okay. The Brookings Institution warned that our civilization would become disintegrated. Mm-hmm. And we stop and think about it. We are disintegrated.
Right.
There's a secret space technology that's probably deeply involved in this treaty that's disintegrated from our general society. Mm-hmm. So it's which is the real? I had that experience. We went to the gate at Area 51, and we have the cameras looking at us, and we have the guards just glaring at us, mm-hmm. and it was the strangest feeling, because it's like on the other side of that fence, on the other side of that gate, is a completely different world, a completely different America on the other side of that gate that we can't even comprehend.
So what's it like? Can you paint me a picture of what you think it's like? Or?
Well, it's completely totalitarian, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Completely. So, yeah, that was an extraordinary experience. This really creeps me out, standing here at this gate.
Wow.
I said, what does go on over there? And even Eisenhower himself was not allowed there. And he had warned his generals, he says, you either tell me what's going on at Area 51, or I'm going to invade it with the army.
Wow.
And find out for myself.
Wow.
So that's how touch and go this has become.
Wow.
And I think, though, that in return for that ultimatum, he did get some information from them.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
I'm sure he did. He said, Ike, it would really not be a good idea if you brought the tanks in here. No. We wouldn't want the extraterrestrials to have to attack our military in broad daylight here. So.
Yeah,
I can see that. But yeah, President Eisenhower in 1961 stated that the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or our democratic processes.
Mm.
And then Kennedy later on said, well, you know Kennedy's quote about secret societies.
Mm.
He says, there's very little in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. There is grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. Now, this is what John F. Kennedy said just 4 months after Eisenhower had made his warning of the military-industrial complex. So, I have a feeling that President Kennedy was fully appraised of the shenanigans that were going on with the extraterrestrials.
Yeah, and I think he was probably the last president that they briefed, because he turned on them. So they say probably to themselves that, no, we're not going to do that again. We don't want any problems.
Well, President Kennedy fired the three main individuals who were involved with the secret CIA banking for the secret space program.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Alan Dulles and General Charles Cabell and Richard Bissell. Mm-hmm. They were the bankers. They were the secret bankers of the CIA, and Kennedy fired them. So who presided with the Warren Commission report? Alan Dulles.
Yeah.
So the fox got back into the henhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think also that I seem to have, I remember reading somewhere that at that meeting, or right after, the Secretary of the Treasury of the United States either was with the president when he met the aliens, or he had a meeting with him right afterwards. When he probably had his own idea of what could be done with the financing of what they needed to do in order to continue. Because the Federal Reserve creates money out of absolutely nothing with a stroke of the pen, so they figured, sure, we'll finance it for you.
Piece of cake, right?
Yeah. $21 trillion right now missing from the military budgets in the United States over the last several decades.
So how much secret space can you buy for that amount?
Oh God, you can build your own planet. Well, not really, but
all right, that's a goodie. That's a good report. And also, I think the last time what really kind of kicked me into this line of research was the story that came out of the Vatican about it was Bishop James McIntyre of the Los Angeles Diocese, who was also allegedly President Eisenhower's Murat meeting in 1954.
Mm-hmm.
And that story was so extraordinary that maybe there's something to this. So that's when I went back and assembled all these fragments and created my video briefing paper.
Mm-hmm. And then we're hearing from people that claim to have been working at Area 51 and likewise at Dulce. They're saying that the Greys, they are totally in charge of both Area 51 and the underground base at Dulce. We're just there as servants to them.
If the Pleiadians are benevolent, I don't know a better word, why are they not helping us, or are they helping us?
Well, I don't know that they're not helping us, but it's like they can't intervene directly. I think they can. I think they can advise up to a point, but they can't intervene. I don't think they can intervene. But apparently that seems to be their operation.
like they say on Star Trek, there is such a thing as the Prime Directive.
Prime Directive, you cannot directly interfere. And
Yeah.
they said that the Greys in this case are a direct violation of that. Direct, blatant, arrogant violation of that.
Yeah. They're like the Borg.
Unfortunately, I'm afraid so.
Yeah.
Yes. So, in spite of the movie E.T. and Steven Spielberg making them look like cutesy little Disney characters, I don't think the Greys are as much fun as Hollywood makes them out to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't want one for a pet.
Well, no.
And then there are several types of greys. You have the small 2.5 foot tall ones, which is basically the cloned robots or automatons. And then you have the higher ones that are more or less in charge of things on the ships, but often also abducted people. They have found that when they're on the ships, you have the small greys, you have the taller greys, and you also have people looking like us. And once in a rare while, you see people on there that has a military uniform. This is what we hear from abductees. So what would that mean?
Good point. The ETs that abducted Betty and Barney Hill, Barney said he could see them with his binoculars. He could see them inside their spaceship. And he says they're Nazis. He says they're dressed like Nazis.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it's high strangeness.
Yeah.
It's really high strangeness. But,
So how does the church or the Vatican factor into this?
According to the story by Christopher Barbato that he got from Vatican intelligence, was that James McIntyre and another Edwin Mooney, another bishop from Detroit, were given the job of being liaisons to the Pleiadians for the Pope, and they were advised by the Pleiadians that Eisenhower had made a deal, a treaty with extraterrestrial group in California that were not to be trusted. But then the Vatican went on to make some kind of agreement with the Nordics, and it was I think it was established by Pope Pius XII.
Yep.
Because as I recall, Pope Pius XII himself had face-to-face contact with the Pleiadians or the Nordics, whatever you want to call them, and he established some kind of liaison or established some kind of level of respect with them, that even though they were not Catholic or quote-unquote Christian, that they were to be revered or honored as though they were, special envoys to the church. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Pope John the 23rd, who was successor to the Pope Pius, that at first he was very skeptical of this arrangement. But over the course of his pontificate, he changed his attitude and said, yes, by all means, these extraterrestrials are to be revered and regarded as our brothers. Our brothers in Christ or whatever. As though, even though they were not, not Catholic Pleiadians. It's like they were
so weird.
No, they were to be regarded as, spiritual equals.
Well, that's interesting.
So,
I would call them spiritual superiors, but maybe that was a good term.
Yeah.
I don't think they went quite that far. But
No.
if I don't have the exact quote with me, but if you read the quote carefully, it would almost suggest what you're saying. I would almost suggest. They couldn't come out and say, these are superior. But we have to at least, even though they don't embrace the Catholic doctrine, we are to honor them as though they did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
So have I rattled your cage tonight?
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you see now? It's like this is the other side of the story. It's like, well, on one hand, disclosure seems like it would be so easy, but now it's like, wait a minute, no, it's not as easy as we think it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge political can of worms. It really is.
I think, though, that if the ones that reveal themselves or the ones subject to the disclosure are benevolent beings, people would welcome it, and it will be just a short shock, and everybody said, wait a minute, look here, now we got free energy, we got cures for this and that, and people would welcome it. But if they were of the negative kind that came here with the destructive capabilities and showed us that, yep, we're now the boss, then that could turn into a real problem for mankind.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So
I don't know.
The other thing that is interesting to kick around is the possibility of a galactic federation. That there's a federation of galactic civilizations that have their own kind of legal framework, to where it's like they could maybe exert influence over a group like the Greys, who are like acting like renegades and who are just flaunting any kind of civilized behavior among the group of the Federation, of a group of a galactic federation that wants to live like with civilized standards. Okay. Can they exert some kind of influence to modify the Greys' behavior? Is that possible? And the other thing is that the Greys are not, they're just little robots. Who really controls them are the very hostile reptilians.
With bad manners.
With very notoriously bad manners. Yes. Okay. And that's the group that allegedly Adolf Hitler's military made a treaty with.
Right. And that's, I don't know, I'm afraid to say some things. My goodness. That's who the Queen is related to? Is that true?
It appears so.
Well,
but isn't the Queen like on her 5th clone, I heard?
I have no idea.
No, okay.
I don't either.
Anyway.
That's wild speculation, but I've heard stories about the Queen being a 15-foot tall reptilian on a good day.
Yeah.
But so it's like, are you going to disclose that to the public? Have the Queen, get on camera and shapeshift right in front of everybody?
Yeah.
How exciting would that be?
Well, there were pictures, and maybe they were probably photoshopped, showing the Queen in a gown with her tail showing.
Oh my God! Yes, I know.
I was like, oh, how interesting. So, what the heck is the answer? What do we do? Do we just like pull our family and our loved ones and our friends closer and just try to live happily ever after? What the heck?
I would have a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow in spite of everything.
Yeah, exactly.
I would make sure. I make a point of having a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow.
Yeah. Happiness.
We still can.
Happiness is a good tool. Happiness is actually, a very good tool.
Right.
Yeah, that can conquer everything.
Yeah.
Love conquers everything. When we really look back and say what we are a holographic projection of a higher spiritual being, and we walk around it just thinking we're alive. Well, we can perfectly well have a happy Thanksgiving because we're not really there anyway. We are a spiritual being somewhere else.
I've chosen that for my reality tomorrow.
Yeah.
Augie, what are you drinking tonight? Wow.
You're the one that gave me the wine.
Maybe I'm a gray in disguise.
Oh, yeah.
Dun dun dun. Oh my goodness. So yeah, I won't be sleeping tonight. Thank you so much, Jim Nichols. No, this is fascinating, and I highly encourage people to check out your website and your YouTube channel. I mean, I got such an education in the past 2 days, and I know I'm a little behind the learning curve, but that was part of my agreement to not remember, but but now I want to remember, and I decreed that more than a year ago. Yeah.
Sure.
So.
And you accept the responsibility with that I may learn things that are uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll be okay.
You got to be ready. You got to be okay.
It'll be okay. Actually, I think the whole planet is going through that experience right now.
The whole planet is going through that experience, and that's why. I just did a meditation tonight in my group that I have, and I'm doing more and more guided imagery meditations for people because we need it. There's so much going on, and if you don't want to numb yourself out in other ways, you really need something to, ground yourself and, find the vibrations that are uplifting again. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you saw the movie Tomorrowland, right? Walt Disney movie Tomorrowland came out a couple of years ago.
How long ago?
2015.
I don't think I saw that.
The little gal in that talks about the two wolves that are fighting.
Right.
The two wolves are fighting. And which wolf wins?
The one you feed.
Bingo.
Right.
Yeah.
So which wolf are you going to feed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm feeding the happiness wolf.
The happiness wolf or the gray wolf?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Those little stinkers. Those grays are never going to be Boy Scouts. I mean, really.
I don't think they really care.
I know. Yeah. I knew that.
They don't really care.
Wow, Jim. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, this was really, really interesting. So,
gosh, we did that hour in no time, didn't we?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, let them know where they can find you again, and go and first of all your website, and also where they can buy some of your videos.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can get my videos. You can go to UFO TV. The Disclosure Channel on Amazon Prime, or you can go on YouTube. You can go all over the place. And my blogs, of course, are at jimnicholsufo.net, and I've got 34 blogs there. Lots of fun reading, if it's a cold, rainy night and you want something to read. That's a place.
Yeah, I've been about 3/4 through all of them, and the thing about those articles that you've written there is that once you get in it, you better set the time because you can't get out of it. It gets so interesting, you just can't stop.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, again, I love the way that you share this information. It's just so, you make it bite-sized. You don't really have to choke on it, and you make it.
That's exactly what I wanted to do. It's like to crunch it down to where it's quick and easy to understand.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate you, Jim Nichols. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being with us.
If you want something a little bit lighter, read my very first blog.
Okay.
Which is called Growing Up with UFOs. Or
Okay.
Growing Up with Flying
Yeah.
Saucers.
Mm-hmm.
And it recounts how, even as a kid, how I got roped into this.
Mm-hmm. Now I can't wait to read it.
I think you'll enjoy it. It's kind of fun and funny, but it's informative also.
Oh, awesome.
That's good. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jim Nichols. Thank you, Augie. Thank you, everybody who's listening live. Shout out to everybody in the chat room. Harry's here. Haven't seen Harry in a while. So good to see you. Shady D. Nancy's here. Mike P. I mean, just... I said Shady D. Yeah, just so great. Jimmy was here or is here, and just really everybody's loving the show tonight, Jim, because of you. So thank you, and
thank you.
We'll be back next week with
good thoughts to everybody for the holiday tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, have a good holiday, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, have a good holiday.
All right,
Bye-bye.
take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.